You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinezic.
Welcome back to The Buzz, brought to you by the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Kinezic, and today we're buzzing into episode 165, and we got a whole palette of, actually, to be honest, we have a whole bunch of native plant stuff to talk about, but this is a little bit slimmer than we're usually coming at you with.
Yeah, I just looked, and in the follow-up section, there's nothing. And I was like, do we have any follow-up? I don't know.
We probably do, but nothing I can remember that we needed to talk about.
One thing I was going to mention is we did get a lot of positive feedback on the road trip episode from Mount Cuba, and how many people appreciated that one. The one thing I do like about that is that they're really non-scripted. We just take a microphone and go, hey, let's record, and it's really just off the top of our heads. Not that these are scripted, but I always kind of feel like we're a little goofier after a long day.
Yeah.
A long day, and we're on the ride home, and we're almost home. But we appreciate all the kind feedback on that episode.
Yep. Yeah, we really do. And I know a lot of people, so their feedback was, I'm already planning my trip to Mount Cuba Center. I can't encourage that enough. So if you haven't started planning, it's definitely something you should start planning. And like we said, it's worth, even if you're not from this area, it's worth making a special trip to. You can tie in a bigger vacation, go to some of our East Coast beaches or something like that. But it is a place much worth
You mean
seeing.
The shore?
I say beach. I'm from New Jersey,
gotta
so
go down
we
the
say
shore.
the beach. It's when you're not from New Jersey that you say you're going to the Jersey Shore.
Going down the shore.
I wasn't even talking about the Jersey Shore. I was saying like
could be the Delaware beaches.
Yeah, the Delaware beaches are also nice. So
Rehoboth is a very nice family spot.
Yep. So,
Awesome. Well, what do you think? Since we're a little on the slim side, you want to just jump right into That's Hot?
Yep.
All right.
That's hot.
All right. I didn't even look to see what you picked this week. What did you? Oh, that's an interesting choice. You want to go first?
No, okay. I want you to go first.
So my choice, and this is a fan favorite anyway, because it's in its full glory right now, is Slender Mountain Mint, which is Pycnanthemum tenuifolium, which just started to really hit full bloom. And it's one of those ones, if you're in anywhere in its vicinity, you can see the amount of pollinator interaction that plant has. But from wildflower.org, actually on the Pinelands Nursery page today, there was a really nice video of our seed fields posted on Mountain Mint. But from wildflower.org, this is a perennial that normally grows about 2 foot tall, can reach 4 foot in rich soils. Clusters of small white flowers with blue or purple spots that will bloom June through September. Plants will start blooming once the plant reaches 1 foot tall. So if you just planted it, you may not get blooms to the following year. It does like sun to part shade, can take moist to dry soils. It's pretty adaptable. It has medium drought tolerance, native from Maine to Georgia, west to Texas, north to Iowa. But all the good stuff, it attracts birds, butterflies, bees, and butterflies will both use the flowers. It's the larval host for the wavy-lined emerald. Numerous animals will eat the leaves. Deer tend not to like it as much. Not saying they won't nip at it, but not as much as their favorite. You can dry the leaves for a nice tea, and you can even kind of take the leaves and break them up and rub them on your skin because mosquitoes don't like that minty smell. And for the tea, it's not a strong tea, but it has a nice minty aftertaste. It's actually very refreshing. I actually didn't think about it. I've had it warm. I would kind of like to try that as just like an iced tea to see how that would be. I'm sure it would be very refreshing.
Yeah, I would think so. I would assume being cold, it would mute some of the flavors.
Yeah,
but
and it's already kind of muted. It's not super strong,
so
but maybe a mojito out of it.
Maybe
Mountain Mint mojito.
Yeah.
Ooh, say that 5 times
good.
fast.
I think if you did Mountain Mint iced tea, it would taste like water that someone just put a little bit of toothpaste in. Not even the real teeth. They brush their teeth and just a little. And I'm teasing. I just want to put a terrible image in everyone's minds that's the summer beverage this year. That's what everyone's going to do.
If you were to dip your tongue in the spit sink at the dentist, that might be. That might be what it takes. No, I'm kidding. It's actually
stop with that.
It's very refreshing, actually. But the other thing too, because it can. I don't want to. It's not aggressive, but it does colony form a little bit, and you can divide the plants occasionally prevent it from overwhelming a garden area if you want. But I've seen it in multiple occasions now over the last week or two, and it's just always filled with pollinators, and it's such a great plant. And I know everyone that listens, or most of the people that listen, already know this, but just it's always nice to point it out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great plant. It's one I have slowly coming in my garden. I only put 1 or 2 plants in, and just each year they get a little bit more vigorous. So
I got a question for you.
Yeah,
let's get your opinion. So our gardens at home, the perennials are getting abnormally tall. Mm-hmm. And they're in good conditions, light conditions, so they're not stretching because of that. But what would you say an average height of coneflower is? Purple coneflower,
I think 3 to 4 feet.
Yeah, they're 6 foot tall.
Interesting.
But huge. Everything is getting taller than expected and then flopping. And at first, I thought maybe they're not getting enough sun, but they're getting enough. They're getting enough sun, and then I found out that Agatha's been watering them every morning and every night. I'm like, I think you're treating them too good.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, typically when you get stuff, not that I'm an expert, but when you hear of stuff that's flopping, it's like getting a little too much water. Way too much is gonna it's gonna stunt things, but a little bit too much will make it stretch. And then and there's another thing that I was gonna say and completely forgot what it was going to be.
We were dry for a little bit, but and now we're just starting to hit
soil. The soil can be more fertile.
Okay,
and sometimes it's just that first year. We've seen that with our seed fields where the first year stuff, we had Monarda officiosa, which again I'll typically see somewhere between 3 and 5 feet tall. That was well over 6 feet. And then the next year was 4 feet tall, and every year since it's been 4 feet tall.
Verona castrum right now, Culver's root is 7 foot tall. It's kind of crazy, and it's we're just starting to hit 90-degree weather here in New Jersey, where we're at, but we've been getting thunderstorms on and off for the last week and a half. And I was like, "Were you just during the drought watering every morning and every dusk?" And she's like, "Oh no." All year. So I'm like, all right, I think you're treating them maybe a little too good, because they're so happy and growing so much that now they're at the point where everything's just laying on top of each other.
Now the other thing I do, and now it's actually prime time for round 2 of this, is I cut just about everything in my garden back. And I treat it as a very informal experiment. As will it live if I do if I do this? And most stuff does. I know. I don't think it's the Asclepias incarnata, which is swamp milkweed, seems to be doing fine with that. The one that doesn't seem to like it is cutleaf coneflower. That'll get really tall. I cut those back. I'm going to see what happens.
You have to do that really early.
Yeah,
really early.
Well, I did that one so I did it right around Memorial Day.
Okay.
And then now is when I'm not going to do it to those again, or the echinacea and stuff that's starting to bloom or is blooming. But goldenrods, asters, that kind of stuff, I'll do that now just so it doesn't get I have some asters that are 5-6 feet tall, and I'm like, I don't want them that tall. I want them a little. And especially when they're in front, you want them a little shorter.
Especially the last week with the thunderstorms and the hot weather. Everything was fine a week ago. It's the last week it stretched exponentially. And the problem is the coneflower is just starting to bloom. Yeah. The swamp milkweed is just starting to bloom. The mountain mint is blooming now. The Verona castrum is just starting to bloom. So everything is just hitting its prime. And I can't touch it now.
Yep.
I could, but I don't want to. So, all right. I just wanted your opinion. It really, really upset me a little. Not upset me, but I was disappointed because it was looking so good, and then all of a sudden,
it
was so out of control. I was like, man.
So
All right, so
you learn.
Yes.
That's from year to year. You learn and get a little better.
I wouldn't call myself a gardener,
Oh, me neither.
like at all. Like
I literally throw things against not the wall, against the ground and see what sticks and see what grows, and which is a little crazy because then you have plants that shouldn't, like, I shouldn't say shouldn't be there, but it's like, oh yeah, I probably should have put that really small Coreopsis in the front, not in the very back.
Yeah.
And this thing that's 6 feet tall should have, the Eupatorium purpureum should have been in the back, not the front. We had the Eupatorium, not purpureum, I think it's maculatum that I have. Where everyone's hollow stem Joe Pye. I don't remember which one's which, but I have those, and I have them right up against the foundation of my house, and they're like 8 feet tall, and they look awesome because now they're like 3-4 years old, and they have so many flower heads. And I'll do those. I just do a little trim on Memorial Day, just to kind of get them to branch a little more, because then you get more, in my experience, more flower heads on them. I like them being. I've trimmed them back harder, and found that it made them too short.
Gotcha.
And so I like how they get like 6, 7, 8 feet tall. I appreciate that, especially because they're in the very back, and it makes it a little bit more impactful because they do start to like flop over a little bit. So like the heads just hang down, but they're like face the road a little more. But I still want that branching, so I'll just be a little bit more selective and only. I don't want to say take the top 6 inches off, because it's different every year. Sometimes they're like, when I trim them, they're 2 feet tall, and I'll probably only take the very, very tips off. And then other times they're closer to 3.5 feet tall, and I'll take off a little bit, maybe a foot off. So, I
mean, realistically,
I'm very judicious about how I'm saying that facetiously. Yeah. I am not. I just kind of eyeball it and say, that looks good. Yeah, I'm not like, oh, you need to do this much. I'm sure there is someone out there that knows how much to take off every time.
And realistically, I want it to look more naturalized. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really, you just saw my property. Like, it's leading to a natural area. I'm trying not to make it as manicured. I want it to be more naturalized, because the rest of the property is. It's just, I'm like, I can do better.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, I'm starting to have more interest in being better at that. And it's nice that Agatha does too, because we kind of do it together.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little more fun. Yeah. But all right, what do you have? Now I've waited. Now I want to hear yours.
So my plant is Juncus fuchsius, which is soft rush. Not your typical garden plant. It's frankly, I don't know anyone who would plant this as a garden plant. I guess if you had a rain garden that you wanted to be nothing but soft rush, you could plant this plant. But it's not going to be your normal selection. But and that's actually kind of what I wanted to feature here. So I'll read what Jersey Yards writes about it. And they wrote that soft rush is a grass-like clump-forming perennial, small greenish yellow to brown flowers bloom in June to August. When they say flowers, it's just like that it does flower. It's definitely not a showy flower. And the plants should be cut back in early spring. Use common rush in rain gardens and at edges of ponds or water gardens. It will tolerate several inches of standing water. This is just like a beast of a plant, because it seems to be able to grow as long as there's enough ground moisture. It'll grow, and it'll grow really, really well and almost take over. And so I was blueberry picking on Saturday, and it was like coming up in between the blueberries. And in some places in the more unkempt areas of the field, it was actually like taking over the blueberry. And blueberries can be pretty assertive plants as well. So it was just like amazing watching these things bully blueberries around and all this other stuff. But it has a lot of like wildlife value because it can be such an aggressive plant, and really just it prevents a lot of erosion control because it colonizes really, really quickly. And then there's all these little nooks and crannies in between the clumps that are great. I'm sure are great for frogs and ducklings and all sorts of stuff, turtles, all sorts of stuff. So it's just it has its purpose. Yeah. Purpose is probably not in a blueberry field or in your garden, but it's just a really unique unique plant that can tolerate a variety of conditions, likes to be on the wetter side.
It's a nice texture to add to a garden.
It is, yeah.
You know, if you had like one plant or two plants in a garden, you could keep it that way. Mm-hmm. It would be, you know, as they form the clump and they flower, it's a really interesting texture that you don't typically get.
Yeah.
That's kind of unique to that. Now, I will say this. My old property, when I had lived there over 20 years, and there's that pipeline easement in the back of the yard. It was like 100 feet easement. And when I first moved in, you could mow that. Like, you could mow that property, and it had been mowed. And I thought it was turf grass, but eventually the hydrology changed to that area, and it went from you could mow it later in the year. You could mow half of it this year. The other half was too wet. So it turned out to be lurid sedge, which actually made a decent-looking lawn. And there were one or two, when it got to the point where you couldn't mow it at all, there were one or two soft rush plants. And by the time I moved, it was 50% soft rush.
Yeah.
You know, being able to come up flower. And it was, I found it interesting outcompeting lurid sedge in an area that they were both in their natural conditions. So
yeah. And it's funny because I found out there's some more of these like garden center liner growers. So nurseries that are growing plants to then sell to other nurseries. Are going to put them in bigger containers and then sell them to garden centers that are growing soft rush for that purpose. So there is some, I guess, demand for this as a garden plant.
It's a good rain garden plant.
Yeah.
Like, we see it a lot being used in rain gardens and in natural areas. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, where can I don't know that I have a spot in my yard, but it would be kind of cool to incorporate a few. I think it would be a nice texture to have. So, awesome.
So do you have a secret for this week, Fran? I'm just thinking ahead.
No, let me look. I don't think I do.
I have one that is literally the antithesis of your secret from last episode.
All right. Awesome. I don't have one, but two great plants. Really consider both of these. If you don't have either of them and you have the right conditions, I think in the right places, both of these serve very important roles. So make sure you check them out and maybe add one. And I say we get into a little bit of this or that. Overwhelming winner this week. Overwhelming. Last Buzz's articles my article was on how native plants are helping clean up pollution in California. Tom's article was on saving moths. Tom hands down wins 19-5.
There's a lot of moth lovers out there.
A lot of moth lovers out there.
Nice to see.
Yes.
Moths are underappreciated. That was basically what the article said.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it's one of those things that, you know, as a kid, you just heard about moths being pests, not pollinators. And I love the research that's going into to start to learn how important moths are to our ecosystem. So you get to choose if you want to go first or second.
I'll go second.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. I'm just looking to see what your article is okay. That looks like a good article. All right. My article this week is called Rain Plays a Surprising Role in Making Some Restored Prairies Healthier Than Others. This is by Lars Brudvig, and this was on theconversation.com. I'm just looking to see how long it is. It's not too bad. I can read this whole thing. Prairies once covered an enormous area of North America, but today have been reduced to a small fraction of this historical range. Imagine an area the size of Texas, the second largest state, shrinking over the course of decades to an area the size of Massachusetts. That's the sixth smallest state. Prairie grasslands produce a lot of benefits, such as storing carbon in soil, providing habitat for wildlife, and protecting the land from erosion. Government agencies, conservation organizations, and homeowners are working to restore native prairie ecosystems in many parts of the central U.S., but it's a daunting challenge. Often newly planted restoration sites end up covered with weeds. I'm an ecologist and have worked with other researchers for a decade to find most effective ways of restoring prairies in the Midwestern United States. Research we published in 2020 points to a reason why planted prairies can fail, one that few had considered earlier: the weather during the year they are planted. Ecological restoration improves the health of ecosystems that have been degraded. For example, returning water to drain wetlands or replanting heavily logged forests. It's an important strategy for tackling many of the world's most pressing environmental challenges. Research shows that repairing damaged ecosystems provides critical habitat for plants and animals. It slows the impact of climate change by drawing down carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. It enhances crop pollination, prevents soil loss, keeps fertilizers out of the waterway. For all of these reasons, the United Nations recently declared 2021 through 2030 to be the decade of ecosystem restoration. These projects can produce wildly inconsistent results even on a similar site where similar techniques have been used. Researchers are starting to understand that restoration success depends on multiple factors, but why some projects succeed and others fail is largely still a mystery. We want to predict outcomes so that agencies can direct scarce funding to sites where the work is most likely to succeed. Before European settlement, prairies were the most expansive ecosystem in North America, covering much of the Midwest and plains. Today, however, most of them have been converted largely to farmland thanks to their fertile soil. Prairie grasslands are nearly extinct east of the Mississippi. As a result, a huge number of plant and animal species that once thrived in those regions have little habitat remaining. Some, like Pauschic skipperling butterflies and prairie-fringed orchids, are now at the risk of extinction. By spreading the seed of prairie plants onto old farmlands, land managers can restore these ecosystems. As new grasslands grow, managers periodically conduct prescribed fires and remove weeds with herbicides to promote the prairie plants. In time, insects and birds will return to restored prairies from nearby areas. I've been to hundreds of restored prairies. Strikingly, no two have been the same. Some are rich communities of prairie plants, while others are packed with weeds. That is non-prairie plant species. This variation can be vexing to land managers who are seeking to restore prairies in particular ways for particular species. In past studies, colleagues and I have identified a number of factors explaining why no two prairies are alike. They include specific soil type, the number of plant species spread as a seed to initiate restoration, and the frequency of prescribed fires. These findings show that although restoration outcomes vary, at least they do so for reasons that are either easily known or under land managers' control. But our new research indicates that this isn't always the case. Land managers widely acknowledge that planting year weather can affect a restoration, but up to now, few scientists have tested this idea. Restorations planted during rainy years should be more successful, meaning they will support a greater diversity and abundance of native plants that we seed on the land. But it's hard to test this hypothesis because it requires many study sites planted under differing weather conditions. Our team worked at 83 restored prairies in Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan that had been planted 2 to 19 months earlier. We recorded which plant species lived within each site and then determined the weather conditions that affected each prairie during the year it was planted. Our results were surprising. We expected that rainy years would promote successful restorations, but instead they produced prairies with more abundant and diverse weeds. These effects were comparable to or larger than the influence of other important factors such as soil conditions, the length of time since the last prescribed fire, and the age of the project. Weeds were more abundant in prairies that had been restored during rainy years as much as 19 years earlier. These sites had also relatively fewer native prairie plant species. Why would dry planting years ultimately lead to more successful restoration than wet years? Even though native prairie plants perform better with more water, as we were showed in a previous study, unfortunately, weeds are super responders to water. We suspect that this explains why they gained dominance and suppressed prairie plants during wet planting years. Our results show that land managers need to guard against detrimental planting year weather conditions, a challenge that is likely to become increasingly important in the future. Climate change is increasing springtime rainfall in the Midwest, which may particularly benefit weeds. To manage the weed burden during wet planting years, managers can mow frequently, repeat seed spreading in a later year, or even avoid planting during anticipated high rainfall years. Humans can't control the weather, but understanding how weather affects restorations can help managers maximize projects' chances of success. So I wouldn't have, I started, when I read it the first time, I was trying to think, when they were saying weeds were more abundant in rainy things, I'm like, well, most of these are drier season plants. They need to stretch deeper, have maybe the roots weren't stretching as deep. They weren't as vigorous for other environments later on. But I hadn't thought that the conditions just better suited weeds. Because I don't think of prairies being places with a lot of rainfall.
Yeah, I think historically they aren't. But for plant establishment, you'd still want. I think you'd still need
Some
I know when
you
we're
need to
doing
keep
stuff,
them
it's
alive,
like,
yeah.
we need to keep things fairly wet. But then it is true, you're also kind of shooting yourself in the foot because you're also watering the weeds when you irrigate or you have rainfall. So which makes things tricky. So that's I'm interested to see what the long-term success looks like. And if having more rainfall, while it did promote more, in that first year, while it did promote more weed pressure, also you had a healthier prairie overall, as long as that weed pressure was managed.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine also, if you were to go back 200 years, there's more introduced weeds
Oh, yeah.
now that play a role than there were then.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you already have established prairies that have already outcompeted a lot of the introduced things. But so I understand that there's more factors in establishing it because there's more to compete against it. But I hadn't thought of climate change as a factor of changing the rainfall in those specific areas. And they're not saying it's year to year. They're just saying, or it's not every year. It's some years are more rainy than others. But imagine having a restoration postponed because it was too rainy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that doesn't...
That's not something we've
looking
seen.
the other way, yeah.
That's not something I've experienced here with a customer saying, "Hey, we need to push that off because it's just we're getting rain."
Yeah.
You know, typically that's like, "Hey, we're getting rain, we're good to go."
Yeah, it's when you're getting like multiple inch rainstorms one after another. That's when it pushes into rain.
Yeah. Yes.
But I guess this is also like rain after establishment. But are we really that good at? Like, I'm not a weather. I follow the weather very closely, but I don't follow it at into well into the future. So are we really that good at projecting if it's this is going to be a heavier rain year? I'm asking people who are listening to write in about this. Are we that good at projecting? We're going to have a lot more rain this year than last year. I feel like the Farmer's Almanac is like, we're going to have more snow, and I don't know if it lines up or not.
I feel like increasingly, especially this summer so far, we've been getting a chance of thunderstorms. And I realize that happens every year. You hit certain humidity and temperature. But if you look at a weather app, it was changing by the minute.
Yeah.
Like, rain is 45 minutes away. Rain is 2 minutes away, and it's going to last an hour. It's only going to last 5 minutes. You know, we got caught in a rainstorm walking home from an event the other day, and it wasn't supposed to rain for another half an hour. And 5 minutes later, we were stuck in a downpour under a tree. And then it was saying it's going to last for 45 minutes. So we decided to run home, and we got halfway home, and it had already passed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if we can't predict that, can we predict that one year is going to be rainier?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to. There's a lot of.
I know it's volatile. I realize.
Well, I'm saying there's a lot of jobs that are relying on this, and I can't think of anyone who would be willing to make that gamble. And I'm not just private industry, but if you're working for Army Corps of Engineers, you have a job, and then there's a whole bunch team that is. Also has jobs with all those nonprofits and federal organizations, state organizations that would be on this. And now it's like, the almanac says it's going to rain a lot.
and I realize you may only get one shot at this, and you need to make the money, the funding go as far as you can.
The money is. So I don't know how you use it practically. I guess is some of what I'm thinking.
It's great. I think it's
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting information saying,
if this happens, we need to overseed later on, or we need to do some.
I think it's more interesting as it's happening, not for foresight. I think we're looking at foresight. Then I don't know. What if things don't happen how it was projected? Either way, I think it's like, okay, had this. I think it's really good information to say. When we know we've had 10 inches of rain in April, May, and June, we know we need to do another seeding, and we need to know we need to have this weed maintenance routine we only have 5 inches, we can forego the weed maintenance and some of the other stuff. I think that's a really useful tool.
That would be useful.
So,
It's knowledge is power. It's always great that this research is being done. It's how are you able to apply that research? I think on this one is the tricky part.
Yeah.
But it was interesting just to see that they're thinking about that hopefully it can lead to better prairie restoration success. So
yeah, there's this is like a really weird thing that just popped in my mind. Do you ever watch the Netflix show Space Force that had Steve Carell in it?
No, I know of the show, but I never watched it.
But one of the early on scenes, they were going to launch this rocket in the newly formed Space Force, and a bunch of the scientists were saying, "Oh no, we can't do the launch today. The weather's not right. It's like it only has like a 60% chance of actually working, something like that." And they have all the scientists out there kind of giving Steve Carell, who's in charge of the Space Force, the last spiel on why they couldn't launch this rocket today. And they're saying why it's not going to work, all this and that. And Steve Carell then says, "No, we're going to do it. This is like the last chance we have to do it. We have to do it today." And everyone's really upset because they don't think it's going to work. And then turns out it does work. And someone asked him, "Well, how come you went against the judgment of the scientists and did it anyway?" And he's like, "Well, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the one guy was holding an umbrella." So, like, the one guy's trying to convince me he's holding an umbrella. So, like, if you're going to be that, well, you can't always be that cautious.
Yeah.
I think this isn't the same thing. It's just,
No,
I don't know. As we're reading this, it popped in my mind. But I think it's
a contributing factor that you should at least consider.
You're constantly weighing risks in a restoration. And if
I mean, we've had jobs pushed because of drought, you know, and that makes sense. Like, I don't think the plants are going to establish. They're going to die before they establish. We can't do this now, or we have to accommodate with water. It's just interesting. You can accommodate for drought, but it seems a little harder to accommodate the other way because you just don't know.
Yeah. And, you get too much rain. It completely destroys everything you did.
Yeah.
Drought, at least you can come in. Sometimes you can come in and irrigate. Drought can completely ruin what you did as well.
You need that balance. You need the root stress to go deeper. You need the moisture to get the flushes. It's a delicate balance. It's just hard completely controlling something that's out of your control.
Yeah. I feel bad that I feel like if Lars listens to this, he's going to be like, "Oh, why did they rip apart my
No,
work?"
we're not ripping at all. It's fantastic.
I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I got hung up on one little part there. I think this is really, really fascinating stuff, and contrary to what I would think as well.
Me as well. And I wouldn't have thought that. It's just how do you factor a lot of this stuff in? And I think it's, hey, let's go back and reseed. Hey, we need to do this. It's at least maybe now in some of these grants or funding, you can factor some of those things. Like, we need to have enough funding if we need a supplemental overseed, if we need someone to spot spray.
Yeah.
That's good to know that, so you can account for that ahead of time and at least have a backup plan.
How would you take this into account as a home gardener?
That's a good question. Because say you buy seed, you need to put seed down. Seed viability, you have to have a way to store it properly, and you can lose viability of some species over time, especially if not stored properly. I think it's the same thing when you plant in a rainy spring and then you get a drought summer. Like you buy a little extra seed, or if you're a home gardener, you pull the weeds. You know what I mean? You're not dealing with hundreds of acres. You're dealing with small portions. So you could probably be a little bit more hands-on and put a little more. It's going to take a little bit more elbow
What I
grease.
did really like in there, the advice is saying just mow it more often. That's a great way to combat with weed pressure in a meadow seeding or prairie seeding. Is that first year, and you're not mowing it like a lawn where you're doing it like 2.5 to 4 inches, 6 to 12 inches high. And you might be going up as the year goes on, but that's some of your annual weeds or your faster growing weeds. You're knocking the tops off all the time.
Yeah.
And like that big blue stem that first year might only get a few inches tall. Or if it even germinates, it's only going to get a few inches tall. You aren't touching that. And if you do just knock off the very top, it's going to rebound because most of the plant was unscathed. where something like mare's tail, which is another native plant, you're chopping half the thing off, which that's still going to rebound too. But if you're just doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it and letting those native plants catch up, keeping the weed pressure from forming a canopy, that first year that's if you're doing this, that's the best in my mind. One of the keys to doing it is monthly, just going through and doing a high mow, which is still, again, you're doing it with it at home. You're doing it with a weed whacker. You're not using your conventional lawnmower. I don't know how you're getting a deck to put some big monster truck tires on your lawnmower. Then you can get a 12-inch mow in.
But the hard part with some of those species is, I think you mentioned big blue stem, and big blue stem isn't really long lived. It needs to reseed. So if you're knocking it down, maybe you're not getting any reseeding that first year. Not that everything's going to flower.
But that first year, you're not even going to get. Yeah,
that's true.
You probably won't even get seed off.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like year 2 or 3 is probably when you're starting. You'll get a little bit of seed. We just did this is one thing with big blue stem, and the first year you wouldn't even know when we put it in.
Okay.
Year 2, you still really wouldn't even know we did anything, except we did one of those mows around like 6 inches tall, and you can see the rows. Like you can see that we planted it, and it's in rows. So, and I'm sure some of it got mowed back, but at least we can see it worked. And now next year is when we're really expecting to have a big flush of those plants, and then and be able to start collecting seed off of them.
Nice.
So
very cool. Very cool. All right, what do you have?
All right, mine is less of an article and more of an information page from a website, but I think it just got put up. At least it was the first time I saw it, and it was from a resource I really like called the Wild Seed Project, which is out of Maine. And this woman, Heather McCargo, who, if anyone from the Wild Seed Project listens to this, tell Heather to email us, because I've reached out to her at least twice to have her on, and I haven't heard anything back. I know I have the right email because you know what it could be? She's bought stuff from my retail business. Okay. And she could be like a lot of people are nowadays, where they have an email specifically for buying stuff so they don't get all the spam that comes afterwards. And maybe that's why she's not seeing it.
I do that on my social media.
Yeah, that's why she hasn't responded to me.
I'm convinced that's what it is. That's exactly what it is.
But so if anyone knows Heather or people from the Wild Seed Project, or you're involved with that, it's a organization we want to feature on our podcast. So please reach out to us.
Yes.
And but they have a bunch of different resources on there. But one of the ones I just saw was called "Navigating the Nurseries: A Resource Guide," and I kind of want to go through what they wrote.
Awesome.
And because I think it's a lot of really, really good advice for people who don't necessarily know the questions to ask of their nurseries. And then I want to give some of my thoughts, because I agree with 95% of it, but there's a couple points as a nursery where I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to disappoint people, so I don't know if you do want to go down that path. So,
all right, cool.
So I'll read it, and then I'll give some more of my thoughts afterwards. So, nurseries are busy operations with lots of moving parts and varying levels of knowledge across different positions. It is important to note that a nursery may be too busy to answer your questions or may not have all the information you're looking for. Don't discount a nursery entirely if they cannot answer all of your questions. Be mindful of how busy they are and other environmental conditions like the time of year. Additionally, larger seed-grown native plants take a long time to establish, so you can expect them to be hard to find or may cost more. Native plants support wildlife, so they may look a bit imperfect, and that's okay. It's not uncommon for native plants to have holes from bugs who feast on the leaves or to be altered by wildlife that lives among them. Lots of native wildlife is co-evolved with native plants and prefer to associate with these plants. Generally, this does not cause harm for the plant and is just one of the many ecological services that native plants provide. At a nursery, it is not always clear how plants are sourced or what growing practices are used, making it difficult for native plant enthusiasts to find responsibly grown native-type plants. Use this guide to help direct your nursery research and consider looking out for these things and asking these questions when you go to buy native plants. First question, are plants nursery propagated plants and or are the seeds collected responsibly? Many slow-growing native plants found in nurseries are wild collected, meaning they were removed from nature, which can harm the local native plant populations. Similarly, collecting seeds from the wild in excess can deplete local native plant populations and potentially destroy them altogether. Selling wild collected plants and seeds that are not responsibly collected is unsustainable at a commercial scale. Opt for nurseries that specify how their plants are propagated to avoid purchasing wild dug plants. If a nursery manager cannot tell you how their plants were propagated or how seeds were collected, consider looking for other vendors. Also consider who you're talking to at the nursery. It's important to be considerate of people's time and their varying levels of expertise or knowledge. What are the nursery's pest management practices? A common but often detrimental pest management strategy is the application of pesticides. Pesticides include a wide range of chemicals that are applied to control pest populations, including animals and insects. In particular, systemic pesticides are often used in nurseries and persist in plant tissues long after their initial application. The broad use of pesticides can potentially cause irreversible damage to the ecosystem as well as human health concerns. There are many pesticides in use today with varying degrees of toxicity, so determining whether or not a nursery uses them and which ones they use can be difficult. It can also be helpful to start by asking specific questions. A good first step is to ask if they next page use neonicotinoids in their growing practices to manage insect pests. Neonicotinoids are a type of systemic pesticide used in agriculture to protect seeds, soil, and plants, as well as in household settings, on lawn, and in gardens. This pesticide affects the nervous system of pollinators and can alter their ability to find food, ultimately damaging pollinator populations. This is of special concern when planting natives because of their unique relationship with specialized native pollinators. Next question is, are the plants grown from seed? Seed-grown native plants contain genetic diversity that results in variation between individual plants. This variation allows plants to maintain different capabilities to cope with environmental stressors such as heat, drought, flooding, and other disturbances associated with a changing climate. Genetic variation is a species-specific strategy for adapting to the unknown environmental conditions of the future. Through native plants grown through cuttings or divisions do not have the same genetic diversity of seed-grown plants, they still support wildlife and are often a good second option when seed-grown plants are unavailable. Seed-grown native plants are a great option when looking for smaller plants. If larger, especially woody plants are desired, vegetatively grown cuttings are a good second option that allow plants an advantage and produce larger plants but include less genetic diversity. Next question is, are plants labeled to clearly distinguish cultivars from naturally occurring species? Many of the plant species available in nurseries are cultivars that have been bred based on traits that are deemed desirable by humans but do not consider the needs of wildlife. Cultivars are often identical clones that lack genetic diversity, making them potentially less equipped to thrive in dynamic climate with added environmental stressors. Cultivated varieties of native plants may still provide benefits and are a good second option when straight species of native plants are unavailable. Next question is, does the nursery label and track the origin and plants of seeds? This allows customers to know the origin of the plants they buy and allows them to be more informed shoppers. The second to last question is, are plants grown in peat-free potting soil? Peat is a finite, non-renewable resource that stores carbon and is often used in potting mixes to increase water and nutrient absorption. When peat is harvested for use in agricultural settings, we consume the resource at rates faster than it can be replenished, and large quantities of carbon are released, which contributes negatively to climate change. If possible, ask your growers what their potting mix is made of and opt for peat-free soil when available. If you can't find a peat-free alternative, don't be discouraged. This is a developing concern in the early stages of being researched, so peat-free alternatives may not be readily available. And the last question is, does the nursery highlight and label the selection of native plants? This can make it easy for consumers to identify native plants.
It's a good resource.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it really is. It's kind of like listing out a standard operating procedure of what to do
exactly
when going in. It's just what level of purity are you going to take going into it before you walk away?
Exactly. Yeah. I think they're all good questions to ask. And that's why I wanted to highlight this. These are the things that when I'm thinking about putting plants in my own garden, this is the stuff I want to ask. The one thing I immediately think of when I read this is, if I went to most garden centers around me,
I don't think they know.
They're not going to know the answer.
I don't think they know the answer to most of this.
Any of this. Because a lot of those
multiple
folks
sources
are seasonal employees. True. You have a number of different plant sources. They aren't the ones necessarily growing the plants. So you're not going to be able to get that answer there. And it's just if you go to a garden center, you're not going to get that. Now you go to specifically a native plant nursery.
They know. Or they know a good portion.
They're going to tend to be a smaller operation. They're going to know.
They may grow most of it themselves.
Yeah. Yep. And even if it's not the individual who did the growing, they'll kind of know the the general practices they uptake. Like for us, not that you can come here and buy plants from us, but I can't tell you exactly where we collected the seed from our plants, but I know our protocols for collecting seed are we're not taking too much of the population. We're collecting from multiple areas, multiple populations, as to not to diminish that. It is seed collected from a local area. We're capturing as much genetic diversity as we can without over collecting. And I get this question, but they're like, oh, well, where was the seed for this high bush blueberry collected? I'm like, well, I couldn't tell you that. Actually, with that one, it's a cutting, but I couldn't tell you exactly where. But I know it's probably within 25 miles of our nursery.
We kind of limit up, like when we give in for wholesale, when we give our customers information, because you don't want to give up your sources either, because you don't want other people going out and collecting where you just sustainably collect it and maybe over collecting, or all of a sudden people are like, we're going to go here and get seed.
Yeah.
So you're a little protective that way. We limit it to the county. That county's all in one eco-region, which makes it, at least it's a good enough answer. Yeah. Here's the great thing about this list. If you're a local garden center and you don't know these answers, and you get 10 people in a week coming in and asking you these questions, then you're going to start thinking about this more moving forward as a business.
Start thinking about it, but I from a garden center perspective, I don't feasibly think they could get those answers.
That's true.
And then have them uniformly represented throughout their staff.
Yeah. I mean, some things, if you see a bunch of proven winner containers, a large portion of these are cultivars, they're clones. Like you can see just from the marketing and knowing a little bit about
that's just because you see it in a proven winner container
doesn't mean
or a Bailey's doesn't necessarily mean it's a non-native or a bad plant.
That's a great.
I
agree.
It's so, and that's where it gets a little dicey. It will probably be a cultivar. I think it would have to be a cultivar if it's in one of their containers. But that doesn't, it could still be a wild type cultivar. So you're going to lack that genetic diversity, but it doesn't mean that it was...
It might be a good second option.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was something that was bred into existence.
Everyone's going to have varying degrees of acceptance. But it's good to ask those questions and figure out what your rule of thumb is and what your line of acceptance is to move forward.
Yeah.
I think asking these questions of garden centers that don't know, maybe they change where they buy some of the stuff. Maybe they do a native section, say, hey, we don't know all of this, but we do know these, and we'll separate these out.
Yeah.
I think the more growing awareness, the more people ask, the more it changes people's business. And slowly over time, hopefully that makes a difference.
Yeah.
It makes a difference on who's buying the plant.
Oh, yeah. And now I will say, and again, this is not written necessarily for garden centers. That's just the traditional buying option for a lot of people, and probably a lot of people's only access to plants, but specifically native plants, unless you're going to get in the car and drive. Sometimes it's a couple hours.
Yeah.
There's more and more of these native nurseries that are popping up, but we don't grow everything. And most people aren't growing everything. If they are, they're growing it in or I shouldn't say no one's growing everything. But even when they do have a wide plant palette, it's typically in pretty small increments.
Yeah.
Like in the tens. So it's tricky. I was going to go somewhere else with that thought, but I don't remember where it was.
But there are, you may never get all the answers.
Yeah.
But there are some key indicators. Like if you walked in and saw one plant in a proven winner's pot and one plant in an American Beauty's pot, even if you don't have all the answers, you probably know that you're a little better off with the American Beauties.
That's one of the really great things about American Beauties. And again, I have zero relationship with American Beauties other than that I know the people that
some of the people
that started
grow it,
and some people that grow it. Yeah. We don't mess with them at all. But that's one of the things I really appreciate as I found more about the program, because I didn't understand it at first either. I thought it was just, these are all cultivars. Who knows where they came from? Yeah. But the behind the brand was they wanted it all to be wild type cultivars. Didn't want it in any big box stores. Wanted to go to independent garden centers, which I think is another admirable thing that they're doing. It's in essence, that means you're supporting small business. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's local ecotype. You're not going to have that same genetic diversity. But a lot of this stuff has been trialed, whether at the growers themselves or the people behind American Beauties, or even some of the stuff from Mount Cuba is in this program. And so it's going to be garden worthy. Yeah. So wouldn't say it's restoration worthy, but it's going to be garden worthy. And I think now you have a brand where I can walk in and see that pot and be pretty confident it's going to meet most of the qualities that I'm looking for as an entering native plant gardener. Now, if I'm becoming more of a native plant purist, it's funny that all my articles end up tying to are this or that's later.
Yeah,
or take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it.
As if you're a native plant purist, you're good. You're probably gonna have slim pickings out of the American Beauties line that fit the criteria you're actually looking for. But as someone who's getting into native plants, now I can go and they have the signage, they have the labeling, they have basically that brand recognition that you can get. Where I can walk up to that and be pretty confident I'm going to get something that's local to where I am, or native to where I am. Going to perform well in my garden and just overall work for me and kind of hook me a little bit more into this. So I think it's a really, really good thing for a starting point, at least, at the very least. I
have American Beauty really plants in my garden.
Yeah. Going back to like the pest management practices that's one where, again, if you go to a small local native plant nursery, if you're lucky enough to have one close to you, that's one where you can find folks that are doing completely pesticide free. It would be a really difficult question for a garden center to answer because, again, you have plants from all over the place. And on top of that, thinking of someone like Daryl with Sunset Farmstead, who we reference a lot, he's not starting a lot of the plants himself. He's buying in a lot of these plants from us and all these other vendors, and then sending them to garden centers primarily. Well, he's completely pesticide free. Yeah. But we aren't, and a lot of the other places he's getting the plants aren't, so he can't claim the plants are pesticide free because they weren't at one point. They are now, and you're usually going to have pesticides are a very fascinating and scientific thing and they're very misunderstood. The lifespans on a lot of these are fairly short. So you have something it was treated with X, Y, or Z at our nursery, and then it goes to another nursery. It sits there for 3 months. The half-life is way over on some of this stuff. So it's and a lot of the stuff will break down molecularly, and then it's what the molecules were, and they'll rebind to other stuff, and it's no longer a thing. Which I think is a concept that does is misunderstood and gets played out in the wrong ways. You look at systemic pesticides; they do have a lot longer lifespan, but it's not always infinite. And then I've mentioned it before with the neonicotinoids. Yeah, they're definitely bad for not just. I always hate that it's always framed around bees and butterflies because that's not what you can avoid impacting the bees and butterflies with neonics and systemic pesticides. What you can't avoid is the larval stages of those things. So if you had a milkweed plant, you could time up the spray where there would be no. I don't want to say no, but limited negative impact to no negative impact on the monarch butterfly that's coming and feeding off the flower. I don't think it's possible to time it up where you would have no negative impact or limited negative impact on the caterpillar that's going to be eating that plant. And it would get rid of the aphids too. But that's where it gets tricky with the neonics. And there's a lot of other systemics that aren't neonics that like I've mentioned before can be, in my opinion, and a lot of other nursery people who are applying this stuff's opinion, can be worse, but they just don't have the name recognition as neonics do.
Yeah, and we just had a conversation with another nurseryman, not about pesticides, but just they're changing the name on this one.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be be used for this.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing.
And it's
it's such a tricky and it's so much to navigate and know.
Yep.
I don't even know how you navigate it.
And there's a lot of Roundup gets a lot of flack, and Monsanto that is now Bayer gets a lot of flack. But because we spray weeds around the nursery to keep aisleways clean, we got to keep a lot of our roadways and aisleways clean, because if you let the weeds come up there, you can't hand pull them all. There's just not enough hours in the day to hand pull them all.
That weed seed.
And if it comes up too much, then the weed seed will go into all the other plants, and then you have groundsel and all this other crazy stuff coming up in pots, and then you're spending a lot of time hand weeding there, because you can't go and spray that with a chemical like Roundup, which is glyphosate. But we've never bought Roundup. We've bought Makazi, which is an off-brand glyphosate, and there's got to be 20 different names, if not more, for glyphosate that aren't Roundup. So it's another thing to consider, is that just because the brand name doesn't necessarily, and then you don't recognize this other name, doesn't necessarily mean it's not exactly the same thing or worse. So yeah, it's but I wouldn't expect to go into my garden center and say, oh yeah, what's the pesticide regimen on?
I need your pesticide cycle. I need the provenance down to the city, or to the township that they're collected from.
I'm thinking of places like Earth First Nursery down in that's Atlantic County, right? Or Toad Shade or Wild Ridge. Everyone has. I shouldn't say everyone, because I just said not everyone has those local native nurseries. But a lot of people have those more local native nurseries that are relatively small. They're doing a lot of wild seed collection. They're not digging plants, and they can afford to not spray a lot of their stuff. And because they're out there every day, and they can be very meticulous with that.
And a lot of these places do mail order, so it's a little easier than it used to be.
Yes.
Still not ideal. Maybe it's not the right provenance for you, but you're finding something that was seed collected and they didn't use pesticides. Yeah. You may not be able to check everything off the list. It just is going to depend on your varying degree of what's acceptable. Yeah,
it's one of the interesting things, and this is one of the reasons I chose this article too, is you'd still need to ask these questions, because for some reason people just assume because you're growing native plants that you're growing them. They'll usually say organically, but they mean pesticide free. Yeah. Which that again is make sure you know that there's a difference there. That organic does not mean pesticide free. It just means you're using organic pesticides. And that's typically, from my experience, being in this industry and visiting a lot of places, that's typically not the case. If you'll have a better shot of finding that when you go to these small, like mom and pop native nurseries that are doing stuff locally, like the ones we just mentioned. And I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I would. Now here I am assuming that they're not doing that. But it's just, those are the places. If you ask those questions, those kind of people are going to have an intimate knowledge of what they did, because they're working with those plants they're the ones that are going out seed collecting. They're the ones that are that potted everything and germinated it and then potted it up and grew it in bigger and bigger and bigger. And now they have just a more intimate relationship with those plants, and they know exactly what they did.
Yeah. So, fantastic article. 2 good articles. And on Monday, the poll will be up, and you can choose Tom's article with the guidelines for navigating native nurseries, the resource guide, or my article on how rain plays a surprising role in restored prairies.
Yeah, we didn't even get to talk about peat.
No.
We already talked about peat a lot.
We could say that.
That is another one.
Maybe that could be a take it or leave it.
The one thing I'll add we've already done as a take it.
Yeah. Have we done peat?
Yeah,
okay.
It was one of the first ones.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'll add about that question in particular, and they did a great job writing out there. Ask the question, expect them to be like, oh no, it has peat in it. Because that is such a modern thing that's happening right now.
Yeah.
Where people are looking at these peat bogs across the northern hemisphere, and saying, hey, this is emitting a lot of sequestered carbon.
Yeah.
When we dig these, it's I don't know what this definition would be. It's a renewable resource, but it's being dug, depending on who you ask, it's being dug faster than it can be renewed. You talk to some of the professors that are working with this, or the people who are managing the bogs themselves, they're like, oh no, it's being renewed. Come up here and we'll show you that it's okay. But you're just looking into wood fibers and paper products and these substitutes that are becoming more popular. Hey, our one of our mix vendors that we work with, I just got an email 2 weeks ago saying, oh yeah, this is the last year we're selling a mix with peat in it because the price keeps skyrocketing. We're looking at renewability concerns. Our customers, fewer and fewer of our customers are looking into other alternatives. We developed a wood fiber based product that we want to try, or that we know works. We've had it university tested, and we're switching to that. So, like I was saying, when you go to your place where you're buying plants and you ask that question, expect them to say, oh yeah, there's peat moss.
There's even that varying degree of, all right, I bought the liner in, I potted it in a peat-free soil, but was the liner grown in peat?
Yeah.
Like, at what degree are you expecting that answer? And I think it's going to be quite a few years before you're consistently finding a peat-free. If you can find it, that's fantastic. Not saying it don't exist. It's just hard, but it should become more readily available as the research goes in and the technology improves to be able to incorporate past it.
Yep.
You know, we talked about, again, this is another pit moss, which is the paper peat moss. That's a fantastic alternative, but you have to change the way you do growing to incorporate it. So it's not just, I'm going to take this out and put this in. Yeah. You have to change practices as well.
Yeah, a lot of these, the companies that are creating the replacements say, hey, it's not a one-for-one replacement.
Yeah.
A lot of times what's going to work best from a growing medium is you replace a portion of, say it's your mix was 60% of it was peat before, and you want to put in some of this replacement. They'd say, oh, go 50-50 with it. So now you're 30% peat and 30% pit moss hydrofiber, other kind of wood fiber. And this is, again, a lot of this stuff that's the replacements big business is coming up with. It's not like they don't have, it's a money-making tool, but it's not like they don't have environmental's best interest in mind at the same time, sometimes. Yeah. So...
No, it's a lot to think about.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, we just not debated it, but we just discussed it for probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yes.
So it's fantastic things to think about. Again, the poll will go up on Monday. Make sure you go to the Facebook group and vote because...
And of course, the choice is yours.
Stay tuned for more of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
All right, I am thinking listener shout-outs.
Listener shout out.
Tom, I'm going to let you go first.
All right. Yeah, so we had a 1 5-star review on Apple, which was from
with one 5-star review with
a write-up,
write-up,
which was Okandalu, and they liked how we weren't native plant purists. Which, if you asked us 3 years ago, maybe we were.
I would have said yeah. I probably would have said yes, but I appreciate that they commented on our approach to this information, and they appreciated that. And I appreciate our listeners noticing that.
Yes. Yep.
So thank you.
So, and then the other one, we had Brad Mudd on Spotify.
Our buddy Brad Madrinsky. Yeah.
And did we sing him happy birthday? or did
We said
wish him
happy
a happy
birthday. I think
birthday?
we wished him a happy
Okay.
birthday.
And then said the last episode was perfect as always and extra chatty, which he liked. So.
And that was on Spotify. You
Yep.
can they
You
did
can
start
interact. Yeah, you can interact
with each episode. If we don't generate a question, Spotify will generate a question for us, so you can go in and answer the question. And I think their automated response is, "What do you think of this episode?"
Yeah,
So,
which Fran, I don't even know how I can interact with it.
I don't know, but a couple people have figured it out. It's called the Q&A.
Yeah, I got to figure out how to see this.
Yeah.
And I have no idea. Let's try playing it. Let's see what happens. And if I go here, no, nothing there. No, that just adds it to my saved
All right,
episodes.
Brad, how were you able to comment? Let us know.
Yeah,
That way we can share with our
'cause
listeners
I
that
want
listen on Spotify.
Yeah, I want to comment too.
So I have a bunch of listener shout-outs today, and there's a reason for it. I want to thank Ed Betts, Jeremy Johnson, Christopher Ryland, Denise Alvarez, Becky Donaldson, Dave Bennett, and all the others that voted Team Fran in our poll on the Facebook group on which team were you voting for during a native plant every day. And I find this interesting that I don't know why, but Christiane and I each had 9 votes. But the Facebook poll, when it broke the percentage out, said I had 38% of the votes and Christiane had 37% of the vote.
Now,
so technically,
I do have a question for you, Fran.
yes.
I saw that you were soliciting votes. One,
Did I solicit votes?
you did, because and maybe it was off the record because I saw at least one of the votes was from your wife.
Oh, she voted, but she saw it and she voted. I didn't
yeah.
solicit it. Actually, I might have groaned a little bit.
So when you count in, and then didn't you vote for yourself too?
I did, but you voted for Christiane. Christiane
Yeah,
voted for you.
exactly.
I
did
had to have a
Christiane vote for
vote,
me?
and I voted for myself, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really pay attention to it.
And you each voted for the cricket as well.
I did vote
so
for the
you
cricket.
voted twice, which is unfair as well.
Why did you make it that you could vote
I only
twice in the
voted.
rules?
I only voted once. But the final tally was Fran 38%, Christiane 37%, Tom 16%, and the cricket had 9% of the vote. So I'm going to take it. Although if you take my wife's vote out of there,
Why wouldn't you take your own vote out of there too?
Well, then-
I voted for another person.
But you voted and Christiane voted. We each voted. There are 3 choices at the time, and we each voted. And we each voted for someone different.
All right. I think it's like one of those grade school things. Like you can vote for anyone, but not yourself.
All right.
it's one of those.
All right. Well, okay.
Just wait. Just wait till my
loss.
secret, and you'll get more votes.
I'll take the loss. I'll take the loss.
I'm pretty sure Christiane won.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she won too. A lot of people were Team Christiane.
I was
which
team
was
Christiane. I loved it when, like, I didn't really care if she could stump me. It was more in particular that she could stump you. That's what,
Christiane is very competitive, even more so when it comes to me.
yeah.
There's definitely, she takes a lot of pride in besting me, which I appreciate that. So, and she does a very good job at it also. So, speaking of take it or leave it, I put this.
I did want to add that
Oh,
everyone who didn't vote for me is now on my list. remember that
The
list
opposite
in,
of listener
in Billy
shout-outs.
Madison's.
It's the opposite of listener shout outs. It's the revenge list. The Billy Madison list. Oh, I can see Tom there with a list of people that didn't vote. That would be funny. All right. Take it or leave it. We've covered so many things on take it or leave it that's probably the hardest part of prepping for the next show is coming up with a take it or leave it. And in conversations, like looking at Oglinda Dew's review of us, commenting that they appreciate that we're not purists and talking about some of these other things. I wanted to see how you felt about native plant purists, that if it was helpful or a detriment to spreading the word of native plants.
Hopefully I don't talk myself in circles here. I think overall, I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
But there's always that one.
I was going to
that is not.
It comes down to the person.
Yeah,
I think sometimes.
Yeah, it's you have people who are I used to be. I still am a native plant purist. If I am given the choice, I'm gonna plant something like locally sourced, seed grown plant, like what we just talked about in my article. Now I have unlimited access to that. Now I'll go outside of those bounds occasionally, but very, very occasionally. Yeah. It's like, and I feel bad doing it. But it's got to serve. I'm a very as a gardener. I was just thinking about this the other day. I like plants that do something for me, whether it's like something I can eat or make a drink out of, or just gives me like joy knowing that I'm helping the environment. But there's stuff like ground covers where I don't have a lot of access to those, so I have to go outside of my normal box there. So it's like, I would say if I didn't have to, I wouldn't, but I kind of have to. Yeah. So that's where I have a lot of cultivars mixed in, is usually in the ground cover layer. I would say I'm a purist.
But say you're putting that in and replacing lawn with it. You just did good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, you want to see the benefit in all of it. I think my issue with it sometimes, and I say it's a benefit.
Yeah.
My issue with it sometimes isn't the person, it's my own sensitivity to it, because we're in the industry and it's what we do. And we've seen people turn people off to native plants by being a strict purist.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm sensitive to a comment that I'm the only one looking at it the way that it is. Like, say someone posts something and then you start getting a bunch of comments, well, there's this, there's this, there's this. And you're like, I look at it sometimes and go, that's obvious. Stop. Don't be, they probably know this.
Yeah.
Don't jam it down their throat. Let them do it. And then I look at it and go, I'm probably the only one thinking that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sensitive to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I never comment, and it's just my perception. It's hard to take what people think via text or social media.
Yeah.
You're reading it with your own inflection of intent sometimes, which you can't necessarily. You're not accurate. Like there's no way I can guess what everyone was meaning.
Yeah.
A lot of it's good intentioned and good reinforcement, but I just feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's...
Sometimes I feel it's too much for a beginner.
When you really think about it, and this is going to be a verbal meme here, is it's a Venn diagram, and it's your native plant purists and the people who just like are like, actually... but in a very condescending way.
Yes.
It does a condescending actually, like not a oh, you might want to know this. There's a big differentiator there between the people who are like, oh, well, this is something I thought you might want to know, and the people who are like, oh, you're actually pretty dumb because you didn't know this. Venn diagram, native plant purists, and the condescending actually people. How much does that cross over?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
But it's the people in the middle, those are the ones I don't like that are native plant purists. But native plant purists as a whole, I would aspire to be more of one. I already am one in a sense. I aspire to be even better at it. But I cut myself a break sometimes. Yeah. Everyone has their guilty pleasures.
Listen, here's a perfect example. I'm a member of another it's not all native, but another plant group, and someone asked for help, and they said they were in the D.C. area. And someone commented, "Where's D.C.?" And they're like, "Washington, D.C., what else do you think?" And he goes, "I'm not from your country.
Yeah.
I don't know what D.C. means."
Yeah.
So it was, and then it led to, then instead of talking about the plant, it was 20 posts on not ridiculing someone for not knowing something, or it just got completely derailed. The plant questions never got answered. And I'm not blaming one person and the other. You just can't always assume.
Yeah.
And that was, Could it have been handled differently? Yes.
Yeah.
It's just the stuff that I have trouble being a spectator and watching.
Oh, yeah. And back to my Venn diagram, I think if you were to base it off of social media, it's a circle. It is just a circle. That was I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry reference, if anyone didn't get that. But which is a movie. I don't know if that's a movie that would fly nowadays.
Probably not.
But
probably not.
But yeah, I think if you pay attention on social media, it would be very close to a circle. But I don't think in actuality it is. I think there's a lot of, and sometimes you have people who act a lot different on social media than they would in real life.
I think it's okay to be a native plant purist, but there has to be a level of tolerance.
Yes.
And understanding. And like we always talk about, like it takes you a while to get to a certain point in your own understanding to accept others to get there too. But I think there's varying degrees of the type of person that is or isn't a purist, because you can go either way. If they're I'm assuming that there's people out there that are anti-native plant. There's got to be. There's got to be. So there's varying level degrees of all of this.
Yeah.
I would like it to be somewhere in the middle, as far as you can be a purist but have understanding of people that are, and go from there. So I don't know. I'm for it with an asterisk.
Yeah, I think there's always an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And don't be in the middle of my Venn diagram here. I need to go, like, there's got to be like a Venn diagram, like, maker website.
Maker, Venn diagram. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. All right, I want to end the show because I want to hear your secret.
All right, so where am I on this big script of ours? All right, yeah, here we are. So thank you for joining us today. Oh, what do I usually say? I'm like, that is it. That wraps us up.
Yeah.
And that wraps us up for today. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed listening to The Buzz. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
RJ Comer, thank you for our Buzz intro theme music. Dave Bennett, thank you for our outro theme music for all their episodes. Make sure you stream or buy RJ's music wherever you consume music, and check out his Americana playlist. I don't know if Dave has any music that you can listen to anywhere other than the Native Plant Anthem. I wonder if he can make it available, because technically it's we would be co-writers. Actually, you would be co-writer. AI. Would AI be a co-writer?
I have no
How do you
idea
do
how
that?
it works, yeah.
But
I
wonder
want my royalty checks.
can he, I'm just saying, can he post this song on iTunes or Spotify for people to stream?
I have no idea. I think I would be against that, because right now the only way, if you want to listen to it, you need to listen to the end of our podcast.
All right, that's true.
No, I'm just kidding. You can do whatever you want.
But like, if anyone could download that song and listen to it,
let me get the aux cord. No, I need to play the end of this podcast.
Can it be like the Native Plants Healthy Planet album, and it could have Dave's version of Native Plant Anthem? It could have Curtis's version of Native Plant Anthem. We can come up with some other songs. Wonder if it could be I don't know. Like, do you have to credit AI?
I have no idea.
Because technically, you didn't write the lyric. Actually, I have no credit in this because you had AI.
Yeah. I just asked it to write me a song, and that's what it came up with.
Yeah.
So,
good question.
I do want to, going back to the vote that you had before.
Yeah. Yes.
I think I think that was another solicitation. You voted for Dave's song.
I did.
And I didn't. And that's probably the only reason he voted for you. So there's another vote stricken off your list, and probably given to Christiane. She didn't even have a chance to vote for his song.
But listen, all right. I think I will definitely agree there's a bias with my wife with who she chose.
My wife didn't even vote.
No.
She didn't know. You didn't give ample notice. We never got our card in the mail with voting instructions or a polling place.
I did vote for myself, and I will say
this,
in defense of both you and Christiane, before the two of you voted for each other, I had already voted for myself. Mm-hmm. So I did lead off with the voting for myself. So if you want to strike my vote and Agatha's vote, I would not protest. But I'm not going to take
I'm
away
not gonna
Dave's
do that.
vote. I'm not going to take away Dave's vote. You can't say for sure. I don't know what his motive is.
I'm saying for sure. I'm saying this was
So, you can follow
the
us.
election was stolen.
I
Oh,
bought
gosh.
votes.
We need to not go any further with that topic.
You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Native Plants _Healthy Planet, and you can also follow the Pinelands Nursery Instagram at Pinelands Nursery, and also check out our YouTube page at Pinelands Nursery. Don't forget about the question and comment line. It's actually been a few buzzes since we've had a call. Make sure you call in at 215-346-6189. You can ask a question or leave a comment. We will do our best to play that and answer it on a future episode of The Buzz. And we hit a milestone, 2,000 members on Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group, which is quite a milestone. And a lot of new posts. Everyone, it's that time of the year where everything's in bloom. Everyone's sharing their native plant photos, and we appreciate and encourage that. And keep it going over there. We love that community's growing.
You can buy Native Plants Healthy Planet merch at our website, www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. There's a link right at the top that'll take you to our Chismar store. And I have other designs. I keep saying this. I just literally haven't had a chance to actually. They're all up here. They're all in my noggin, and I haven't been able to put them on the screen.
Our coworker Christine has one for you.
Oh, good.
She brainstormed a good idea for you.
And she probably is a lot better at making these than I am.
It wasn't the design, but it was the phrase.
Yeah.
So
okay,
I'll share with you after that.
Sounds good. You can listen to Native Plants Healthy Planet. Oh yeah, going back a page, we don't keep any of that money. I do like to make sure that's known. This isn't a profit source for us. We don't feel it's fair for us to keep it. So we just take it and then give it to organizations we think are doing really good work, which, Fran, I did check last week, and we are at a point where we can give a little bit more away.
That's wonderful. So, all right, we have to have a discussion to figure out who we want to do that to.
So,
wait, who's it been so far? It's been Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve, Sourland
Conservancy, and Native Habitat Project.
All right.
So
I love that we hit that milestone.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
So you can listen to Native Plants Healthy Planet at really wherever you're listening now. But if you want to try listening someplace else, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, really wherever you consume your podcasts. Do us a big favor and subscribe, or save us or add us whatever you got to do on your platform. And then on Apple Podcasts and really wherever you can leave a review, leave a 5-star review. That does a lot. I kind of wrap around a little bit differently and say, hey, if you write something, I'll give you a shout out on our Buzz episodes. So write something, and I'll say nice things about you, about how you said nice things about us.
Do you want to commit to the next Buzz that we do will be after our vacations?
Yeah.
Do you want to commit to announcing who we're donating to?
I have a feeling we should do it the one after that.
Okay.
Just because, and that
you
being said,
anything,
any dollars that come in between now and then, we'll give that. Not because of the new designs, because I doubt I'm going to actually have them up by then.
Okay.
Because I have a feeling we're going to come back from vacation and forget that we said that. So we need to put a note in.
All right.
That we're going to do that and then do it the one after that.
Okay. All right.
So,
Perfect.
Because, you understand? Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense to me. I wrote a note. Now, will I remember to put it in the notes?
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah. So, all right. I do have a secret. Fran had that very beautiful story. Well, I guess it was a story started out very tragically and then ended up maybe good.
It was anxiety ridden for me. Well, the nest was empty.
Yeah.
So I assume that at one point, one bird, I don't know, I can't remember which part of the story, where we were, if the birds were still in the nest at the time that I gave the secret, but. A week later, I took a peek in the nest, and one bird was gone, and the other bird was there. And to me, I'm like, is that one okay? I couldn't quite tell. And then the next day, the other bird was gone as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that both birds, we could hear chirping all throughout the week, baby bird chirping. So I'm assuming that I'm going to say that they left the nest and flourished.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope.
Yeah.
That's the story. That's the version of reality I'm going with.
I will say, if you're squeamish or like Fran's reality, you might want to just hit stop right now, because this is something this is literally just happened at our house.
Okay.
So that's your warning.
Yes.
So this part's really nice. Last year my wife puts like a seasonal wreath on our door. So it has it's all fake flowers.
Did you tell this story before?
Well, I think I did,
okay.
But there's an update.
Oh, okay.
So last year we had a robin build a nest in this wreath. My wife left it because this is a cool little addition that I didn't even have to put on. Okay, so this year, doves build the. Okay. This is where I think we left off.
Yeah.
Doves build a nest on top of the second. Now we have 2 nests in a stack.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Those dovelings, whatever you'd call them, they get big, they fly away, living their own lives. A robin built a nest on top of the nest that was on top of the nest. So now we have 3 nests.
Wow.
The eggs hatch, and then I'm driving. I was with my dad. I'm driving back from someplace. My wife calls me, bawling on the phone, saying one of the chicks is on the ground outside of the nest. Okay. I think when I opened the door, it fell out.
Oh.
And I'm like, I don't know. Not something I would cry about, but I get it. You're very attached to these things. You're looking at them every day, taking pictures, showing our son. We'll just pick it up, put it back in. The whole thing about birds can smell the you on them and will reject the thing. Complete myth.
Cornell,
not true.
Cornell Lab said not
I don't think birds can really smell. But that might be a myth too.
What we had read through Cornell Labs was that, if you handle them, that's not going to deter. It was, you have to, don't move the nest too far away. And if you disturb it too many times, they'll consider it a threat and abandon it.
Yeah. Anyway, she hangs up the phone, put the chick back in the nest, comes back, the bird's on the ground again. And she's like, well, I definitely didn't knock it out that time.
Yeah.
And then I guess she put it back in and then saw the mama robin pushing the chick out of the nest. And she's still very upset. Saw the robin push the bird out of the nest. And then I grabbed my brother just because he knows more about birds than I do. And I was like, it's probably not. I just keep putting it back in, and if it keeps pushing it out, then okay, well, I'll move it so it's not in your line of sight. And it flew away. But I started to joke about that. But yeah, my brother's like, oh yeah, robins do that because, or a lot of birds will do that because they'll have young that for whatever reason they just aren't eating right or there's something wrong with them. And that's their way of making sure they're giving their resources to the ones that are healthy and that have the best chance of survival. Then he's like, also, a lot of other birds will go into other nests and do that to try and take over the nests.
I've heard that house sparrows and starlings will do that.
So he's like, other birds will come and like basically peck out like the chicks of other nests and get rid of them. And then he was like, actually, just last year, he's like, crows are freaking wild because they'll go and eat baby chicks. And he's like, I remember I was like, I was looking at this tree and there's a crow and it had a chick that it picked out of another nest and it's just in its beak and it just kept dropping it on the ground, going down, picking it up, and then going back up in the tree again, dropping it. It was like it was playing with it. And then eventually it ate it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, yeah, it's the circle of life is how I like to look at it.
Well, let me ask you this also with the baby chick, because we did a lot of research after this happened, and cardinals, we knew it was a 7 to 9 day once they hatch before they leave the nest, which is really short. I didn't realize it was that short. Mm-hmm. And then was the chick that was getting knocked out of the nest, was it too young to fly?
Oh yeah, this was its first. It wouldn't have been 24 hours old yet.
Oh, okay.
It was like its first full day of life.
Because I have read, and Agatha and I have had this talk, like robins. There were baby robins in the backyard. Yeah. Agatha's like, oh, it had to have fallen out of the nest because it definitely looks too young to fly. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was house finch. It wasn't robins. It was house finches. But you could see there were multiple ones, and the parents were around, and it was, we looked up and it said, oh, a lot of this is part of their learning experience. They have to build up the endurance to
strength
fly
and
and the
whatever.
strength, and this is part of the learning. They're not going to fly right away. Don't move them. Don't touch them. Let them experience. The parents need them to experience this. So I didn't know if it was at that stage where it was maybe they were knocking them out, like it should be flying, and it just. But you're saying it was so young that.
Oh yeah, that was not. It was. They had hatched maybe the afternoon, evening, the day before.
Wow.
This was like there was 4 eggs in the nest. Only 2 of them had hatched so far.
Oh, wow.
It was like
All right.
this bird was getting kicked out because
Yeah.
something was up with it. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, realistically, baby birds are just like the little Snickers bars for so many things. Like they're young, they're immobile, they're very soft. That's like a nice little morsel for another kind of predator that can get to it, and that's really important too. It's
It's all part of that.
That whole Hal Herzog book, that some we love, some we hate, and some we eat, like really got in my psyche. And I'm like, why should I care more about this little baby bird than the thing that's trying to eat it?
Didn't we have a conversation about young turkey and how many actually?
Oh yeah, it's like 25% make it because it's getting eaten by raccoons and fox and snakes and all kinds of stuff. But like that's an important part. Until we had Captain Al on, I think talking about to align this with something, but with horseshoe crabs, I'm like, oh yeah, horseshoe crabs are this ancient thing. They're important because we can use their blood to create medicines and all this stuff. And then I completely glossed over the fact, they're important because so many things eat their eggs.
Yeah.
And if we don't have them, we don't have the eggs. And then all these other species that need to eat the eggs go away. And all the species that eat them go away.
I understand that and completely understand that. I think why I was so invested in the Cardinals from the last one was that I didn't want to be the reason that they didn't make it. So,
and I've come to, as a hunter, one of the things I've come to terms with is you try and do everything perfectly so you can make sure that when you harvest an animal, the kill is really fast, as fast as possible, and then nothing is. I'd always thought nothing. I don't want anything to go to waste. I want to be able to find it quickly so I can take it and consume it. Then I don't know. It just kind of clicked for me one day. I'm like, that's not. Even if I hit one and I can't find it for whatever reason, it's not necessarily going to waste because how much life did I just create with all the insects and fungi and all the things that are going to consume that animal?
And then turkey vultures or whatever.
Turkey vultures, all this other stuff that's going to be able to consume that animal. That we have way too many of on our landscape in New Jersey. So was it really a waste, or was it just a waste because I didn't get it? Yeah. Like in a roundabout way, you can consider that I wasn't able to find it was actually more impactful for the environment than that I was. Yeah. And that's not just me trying to feel better about not being able to get it. But I think there's just like same thing with roadkill.
Yeah.
Like
there's a reality.
There's a reality to it. There's so many other things, like those maggots would not be able to live. And I know a lot of people don't like maggots, but they wouldn't be able to live and create whatever they're going to grow up into, whether it's flies or other kind of beetles, whatever. They wouldn't have existed if I wasn't able to find that animal.
Well, I think I told you last year there was the milkweed plants. Agatha was harvesting the secondary milkweed plants coming up, and she was giving them away to coworkers or friends. Yeah. And she got them in the house in a jar, and there was a monarch caterpillar, which ended up going into its chrysalis and then hatching. Yeah. And we were like proud parents, and I have my camera, we're taking photos, and a bird swooped down and got it. Yep. I don't know if I ever didn't quite kill it because it kind of dropped it, but it destroyed one of the wings, and then it wasn't quite right after that. And it just didn't. Yeah. We tried to nurse it back, and it was just like it's part of the reality. Caterpillars are food, like you talk about Lepidoptera feeding chickadees.
Yeah, no one thinks about with the monarch butterflies. I've thought about that too, and I haven't really dug into it, but it's like, are they really important because of what they are? Or are they important because they can be food? Yeah. And I think it's some of both. It's never a black or white answer.
No, it's not. Yeah. It's all part of it, and it's not necessarily the answer you want to see. Yeah. So I don't, like I said with the Cardinals, I know one was gone. The other one, I looked in there and it had grown. I'm guessing it was sleeping. the second one, because it was gone like the very next day, and it wasn't on the ground. It wasn't in pieces. So I'm assuming that one left the nest, the other one left the day after, and it was all good. That's the story I'm sticking with.
Yep. So, but yeah, no, that was my secret. Like I said, the complete opposite of Fran's secret last week. But no, it literally just happened. I think it was last Thursday.
Wow.
So I was taking my dad picking him up from the car dealership. He was getting some work done. So, all right. Well, cool. Thank you, everyone. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thanks again, everyone. Coming up next week, I'm not sure. It's going to be one or two options of what you're getting. We have two things planned, and I'm not sure which one it will be, but it will be something cool. So make sure you tune in again next time. And until then, keep it native.
Woods, wetlands, and dales grows a bounty of beauty that never fails. Our native plants, so diverse and so rare, treasures of our land beyond compare. From the ferns below, soaring oaks above, each plant has a place, each plant needs love. Monarch caterpillars munch milk, wheat so tall, bees buzz about, sipping nectar from all. Oh, native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand. To preserve our generations to come, and beauty and potency second to none. To protect and preserve the earth, to restore the native plant movement you just can't ignore.
Goldenrod, asters, and flowers galore. Monarch so stunning, can't help but adore. Your colors, the fragrance, a feast for the eyes. A value to wildlife, no need to disguise.
Native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.